Now, as we all know all too well, once a year at the Magic and Mystery School, an eclectic ensemble of congruent conjurers convene to seek out esoteric knowledge, all while pondering imponderable questions like, what is the meaning of meaning? Why are we here and not there? And most importantly, why does Master Payne use PowerPoint in his presentation, which is the actual title of this year's pep talk and not the working title of questions, questions, questions that I was forced to send in before the slideshow was even halfway done. Stupid deadlines. Now, to answer the question, we must venture back in time to 1971 when, while on a family vacation, a 13-year-old me went to Knott's Berry Farm where I came across my very first magic shop, the Magic Cave, where a very young Mike Caveney sold me my very first magic trick, a set of Adam's Chinese linking rings. This was the official start of what was to become my lifelong pursuit of magic. And a few years later, like most teenagers, I developed an interest in the opposite sex. They, however, never developed an interest in me, and so despite certain urges from time to time, I never stopped performing magic, and through a dedicated regime of self-denial, focused practice, and a completely unrealistic fantasy life, I got really good at card fans. Fortunately, I eventually found someone who liked me as much as I liked her, which is why I moved from my small hometown to the big city where, after performing a mystic ceremony that would forever bind us together, I continued to hone my magic skills and develop my performing persona, all while attending the occasional magic lecture, one of which took place here. Well, it wasn't a Taco Bell at the time, it was an Elks Lodge, and what transpired there forever changed my outlook on magic and nearly convinced me to just give it all up and throw in the proverbial dirty hand towel. So, who was this nefarious necromancer who made me seriously question what magic was and nearly caused me to abandon the practice of it altogether? Well, it was none other than Eugene Burger. But how can this be, you say? Eugene loves everyone and would never do anything to discourage a fellow magician. But even though I knew it wasn't intentional, going to his lecture made me feel like this. Because on the mountain of madness we call magic, most performers can be found here on the crest of conjuring, while Eugene resided way up here at the pinnacle of prestidigitation. Yet, after going to his lecture, I felt as if I was all the way down here in the foothills of fooling. Because here was a guy who could entertain, engage, and mystify a whole room of people with a perfectly constructed routine using just a piece of thread. I knew then that I was never going to even come close to this level of mastery, so why even try? But I had already given up philately, cast aside panapictographisty, and abandoned a not-so-promising career in art. So magic was all I had left. This is why I set my sights a lot lower and continued my pursuit of the practice. This went on for several years, and even though I still went to the occasional Eugene Burger lecture, I tried to not let them adversely affect me. It didn't work. But eventually I met this guy, Frederick Turner, who told me that if I really wanted to get better, that I should attend a magic and meaning conference, a suggestion I flatly rejected, telling him that the focus on mock rituals, faux ceremonies, and the emphasis on the spiritual side of magic just wasn't my bag. I was perfectly happy just doing tricks. Besides, Eugene was going to be there, and I didn't want to spend 3 days in Las Vegas trying to avoid him. But Fred was persistent and eventually wore me down, so I decided to go. Now, once Jeff found out that I was attending the conference, he called me up and asked me to do a presentation, probably because we had met in passing a few times before, and he was somewhat familiar with my work, so he thought that I would be a worthwhile addition to the event. But I really didn't think I would, so I told him that I didn't have anything of interest to say. But he insisted that I did and asked again, so I told him I really didn't want to, but he pressed on. I said it wasn't a good idea as I was unsure I'd be a good fit, but he thought I would and asked again. So I said perhaps next year would be better as I'd have a better understanding of the conference, but he said no time like the present and asked again, so I just tried no. But Jeff is nothing if not persistent, so eventually he too wore me down, and I agreed to do a presentation. Now, one of the reasons I was so reticent to give a lecture is that I had tried it before with disastrous results. Back in 2005, I won the PCAM Pro Challenge. This came with a $1,000 prize package, a booking at the Magic Castle, which never materialized, and a slot in the gala show, as well as the lecture and the following year's convention. So, I wrote up a lecture and even comprised a set of notes to go with it. I was all ready to go. Unfortunately, my lecture slot was right after this guy, Murray Hatfield, an excellent magician who, by chance, covered nearly all the topics that I was going to talk about, leaving me to make up a new lecture on the fly. Needless to say, it didn't go at all well, which is why I decided that if I were ever to speak to a group of magicians again, I would need to use something to keep me on topic. So I chose PowerPoint. When I tell people this is usually the sort of reaction I get, which is understandable, because we've all had to sit through insufferable presentations with convoluted flowcharts, obtuse graphs, and indecipherable slides. But I envisioned a presentation where the slides were completely visual and used to emphasize points or provide punchlines or be the jokes unto themselves. Plus, my 9 to 5 at the time was in IT support, and I knew that PowerPoint could do far more than just make boring, static slides. Plus, I had enough downtime in between calls to create complex slides like this one that used over 40 animations in a single slide. So, armed with a killer 20-minute presentation comprised of 70 custom-made slides, I went to the conference where I was somewhat dismayed to find that I was the final pep talk on the bill, which didn't bother me, at least until the conference started, and I realized that I had made a horrible mistake. Because all the presentations were serious and scholarly, dealing with chakras and Vedic cycles and sacred geometry and its use in conjunction with sponge balls. And here I was sitting on an irreverent and acerbic speech inspired by the 6-card repeat. I was going to die. My presentation couldn't be changed because it was set in stone. Well, burned onto a CD, which is just as bad. So for 3 days, 3 long, endless days, I sat in the back of the room in a state of dread, knowing that my presentation was totally inappropriate for the conference. As my time slot approached, I scanned the room, looking for the nearest exit, and took solace in the fact that no one present really knew who I was, so I could slink out in shame with a certain amount of anonymity. I took the stage and prepared to bomb miserably, like no one had ever bombed before. But to my surprise, the presentation went over far better than I had expected, and at the end I received an enthusiastic standing ovation, because after 3 days of really intense, mind-filling presentation that overloaded everyone's mental capacity, my presentation was the perfect aperitif, which made me very happy. And as I was packing up my equipment, I felt someone hugging me from behind. I turned around to discover that it was Eugene Burger telling me that this was the best presentation that he had ever seen, which made me even happier, because that meant I was no longer regulated to the foothills of fooling, but was now up here with Eugene at the pinnacle of prestidigitation. Well, not really. That was just the adrenaline talking. I was actually at the base camp preparing my ascent. And this is the reason why when Jeff called me for the next year's conference and asked me to do a presentation, I said, okay. For the next 12 years or so, I did a PowerPoint presentation on a variety of topics and soon became the official closer of the conference. Over that time, Eugene and I became friends, and he no longer depressed me when I saw him speak or perform. He once even held a workshop in my living room. And that is why I use PowerPoint in my presentations. But I hear you say this is the magic and meaning of conference. So what is the meaning of this presentation? To which I can say, don't know. Because as I said, I've done a dozen of these presentations over the years, making this one lucky number 13. I guess I'm just out of pertinent or interesting things to say. But if I have to leave you with something, I'll leave you with this. Never put your idols on pedestals. And when Jeff asks you to do a presentation, always say yes, as you never know where that's going to lead. You might even win a major award. Thank you.